This young man is Dave Armstrong, and Dave, off you go when you're ready.
G'day guys, my name's Dave Armstrong. I'm located in Melbourne, and my background has been running several companies across quite a few decades. And basically those companies were an adventure company. So my first ever business was a business I set up scuba diving in Antarctica. So I sailed a yacht from South America down to Antarctica, and we scuba dived down there. And then I set up an adventure company doing treks and climbs, and so basically I've done a whole bunch of Kokodas. I've done trekking through the mountains in Nepal, all different things, taking clients all over the world. So that was one of my companies. The other one that I set up was a sports medicine company that was in Melbourne, and then we ended up being in Sydney as well. That was basically I managed HealMe Park Stadium, if you guys know where that is, but that was one of the places that we managed, the National Tennis Centre. We looked after stuff there. Anyway, so that was my background. I had these companies, and then I had my daughter, and so my daughter was my firstborn, and one of our athletes was a guy called Nick Patterson. So you may have heard of Nick Patterson. He was one of our athletes. He was a professional fighter, professional MMA fighter. And we were sort of connected as friends, but, mostly colleagues through the sports performance side. And he started posting about vaccines. And my daughter we vaccinated the first ones, this 2 month, and then at about 4 months, I saw some of these posts, and anyway, I caught up with Nick. I went to a fight, one of his fights in Melbourne, and he had a terrible fight. He had his arm dislocated, and he was on his way to the UFC. And so little did I know, he had a prayer just before going out to his fight, and he was aware of the craziness that was happening in the world, and basically had a prayer and said, God, if I'm meant to be going on to the UFC and doing that, please make that the case. If not, make it clear that it's not to be the case. And evidently he dislocated his arm, and I ended up being the first person to go out and see him after the fight. And the first thing after we sort of talked about his arm and the dislocation, all of that, was, mate, I've been following some of your posts, and I'm quite concerned on this, catch up and do some things. So not only was that prayer of his answered pretty clearly, we then continued and we started doing a journey together. And so that journey was basically my waking up period. That was me researching and finding out. And the first step for me was to research all the different vaccines. And obviously I had, we ran a sports medicine company for a decade, and, all the traditional medical sort of ideas. And then once I started doing my research, I found that I couldn't continue to do that. And so Nick and I then started looking at what we could do. And he had his MMA gym that I used to go down to and train as well. And we decided that one of the things was for fluoride, that fluoride was stopping the ability for people to think clearly. So we decided we'll set up a little business where we'd take a truck up the mountain, would fill up these containers of water, and would come back down and would sell them out of his gym, so that he had that people could get the good water and start thinking and start waking up to what was happening in the world. So that was one of the little things we did, amongst a bunch of other things. And then we had there was something that was going on in the United States, in a place called Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, where they found an underground bunker. And this bunker had about 50 pairs of kids' shoes out there. It had straps on these trees where they'd rape the kids, and they'd traffic them across from Mexico. And there was all this other sort of evidence there, and they put out this call for help for people to do search and rescue. So we basically, this post went up. We didn't really have the money to go across and help, but I said to Nick, I sent in the post of this stuff, and I said, how good would it be if we could go across and help? And literally overnight, $11,000 turned up into his account, which we couldn't account for in any other logical reason. And so the next day we took off. He rang me and he said, Dave, we're going to Arizona. We're going to go help these kids. So we booked our tickets the next day, and we took off, and we were there within about a week. During that time, they found a child's skull, and they'd found a bunch of other stuff, and it was hitting quite a lot of news. And we went across there and did a whole bunch of different things. So we ended up sort of running military style operations over there with them for the period. We had ex-Marines and everything that were there. And then from that, because of what we were reporting back on social media, etc., a lady called Fiona Barnett, who some of you may have heard of, she reached out to us, and we started working and doing some things with Fiona. And another gentleman called Isaac Kappy, and Isaac was a Hollywood actor. He blew the lid on some of the pedophilia stuff over there, and was quite a big target. So he came out to Australia for a period of time. He stayed at my house, and he stayed with Fiona, and we were planning on doing a whole bunch in the child trafficking area. So anyway, that came to an abrupt halt. Isaac went back over to the States, and he was killed, or whatever you want to say, suicided, whatever it was. And Fiona went into hiding, and so she cut off all connections to everyone else. So the two people we were working with on this project were no longer available, and so we sort of were searching for what we were meant to be doing, and we helped a bunch of other groups. And around this time, two things happened. Is one, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that was basically the start of my health journey. I didn't know what I was to basically do. I just knew I wasn't going to do chemotherapy, and so it took me quite a while to research an alternative option. And so that was my start on that stuff. And in the same sort of time, Nick Patterson, he had his gym open, and he basically had the police knock at the door of this gym, demanding to get in. And we'd both been studying sort of, loosely common law, higher spiritual law, all of those sorts of things. And he was able to send the police on their way on several occasions. And some of those videos went viral, and he became known as, a business that was standing up against the COVID lockdowns, etc. So Nick and I then started a group called the Peacemakers, and the Peacemakers were for the protests that were happening in Melbourne. And it was to stand in between the police and the protesters, and one, to stop the agitators of the police, and the other part was to stop the police from attacking the crowd. So we started the Peacemakers, and we started that process. And during that time, I reached out to a guy called Tom Barnett, and Tom Barnett had also gone viral around the same sort of time on his own journey for a video that was, "You can't catch a virus." And so that sort of did the rounds internationally. And then Tom and I connected, and we released what was to be called HealMe, which was effectively an online health platform helping people with alternative health, such as my journey with the cancer journey. And that sort of expanded to sort of all different health things, not just cancer. And so that we sort of sat with that for a while, and things were ticking along in all aspects. And then with all the COVID lockdowns, and then especially the mandates on the vaccines and that sort of thing, we both had, Tom, Nick, myself, all had experience in this lawful sort of stuff. So we started helping people with notices and we set up and we launched Lawful Me. And Lawful Me, we brought on a guy called Darren Dixon, who's also very well known. He runs a website called Constitution Watch. And then we basically started to expand the HealMe, the Lawful Me. We created Spiritual Me, Academy, and Grow Me. And so we ended up with this online platform and community that's flourished and been, quite amazing. So that's sort of the growth of what we've done on the online community. And then what we realized is that we need to be doing more in person as well. So recently we've, in the last sort of 6 to 8 months, we've started building a health retreat, or a retreat in general, up in the Byron hinterland with one of our members. So that's been a big project, and we've been building all that out, and that's probably about 2 months before that will be open. And then we'll be helping those who have been vaccine injured and a range of other things, as well as the disengaged youth, the people that have been targeted with the different agendas, with they're all craziness within the schools and all of that sort of stuff. So that's sort of what we're doing, and my journey in brief of what we've done.
Fantastic. Wow, what a fantastic journey, Dave. Really, really impressed with that. You can still hear me clearly, okay?
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to kind of ask, because I'm the only one with the microphone, so oh, no, there's somebody else here. But so that situation in around where Isaac came over, I didn't realize he was actually in Australia, and I didn't also realize that Fiona and Isaac were connected. And obviously the mainstream media just mess up everything and give you a terrible narrative. And the whole thing about Isaac is he just went totally paranoid and he was crazy. When you met him in person, was he crazy? Was he lucid? How did you believe most of what he said?
Yeah, no, I did, and he was lucid. And we were texting the day before he passed or whatever. There's different conspiracies on that as well, but yeah, I don't think he was crazy. Whether he was attacked by any, sort of energy weapons or whatever, I don't know. We didn't stay in that much contact, but he was working with professional athletes as well. There's this spoiltness that was, that when people have had a very different life, they also exhibit some of those things, and he was typical of that in the Hollywood sense. So that's sort of who he was, which I'm sure most people who met him would agree. But he was very lucid and keen to share what he'd seen, and he actually did a presentation at Nick's gym while he was there as well, and shared photos and information that he had and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think he was legitimate. I think Fiona's legitimate, and yeah, it's a crazy world.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because I think for a lot of people, just that stretch towards how diabolical this maybe satanic edge to what's going on in the world is quite difficult for some people to jump across. But I mean, even now in Maui, we know that there's thousands of children that are just unaccounted for. We're hearing nothing about it. So for me, there's far too many question marks to not, for all that kind of side of things, not to carry at least a fair bit of weight.
Yeah, I mean, when we did the stuff in Arizona, this just gives you an idea. I mean, we were nobody. Nick and I going across, we were nobody. We came back, we had death threats. They put photos of my kids up online. We ended up sort of exposing this group in particular. So it was interesting. There was a guy called Craig Sawyer who ran a group called Vets for Child Rescue. And he went out to report on this underground bunker. He said it was legitimate. And a few days later, he reversed his thoughts on it. He came back online and said, oh, no, it's all fake, blah, blah, blah. And he got paid off. So there was this group that was attacking online, and this guy called Craig Sawyer, who ended up both being exposed, and they ended up infighting as well and exposing like who got paid off, etc. And not only did we have death threats, there was a guy that was shot a little while later on one of the other missions with the group that we were with. And then Nick and I both were traveling back to the US for other work. We both got blocked from going back with the Department of Homeland Security. So these people have the ability to, no matter what you want to say, they had the ability to block us going back to the US, and they were for completely different projects. But, they're obviously connected at some level. Where the underground bunker was, it was on the land of a company called Cemex. And Cemex is the largest concreting company in the world. And they just happen to have all their cementing companies or their business sites along the border of the US-Mexico border. And their sister company, it happens to be underground storage. So you've got a concreting company and you've got a underground storage company that tend to be all the way along the border. And they just happen to donate $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. So, when you start delving into this stuff, it does get pretty dark, and it's pretty awful stuff. And we were sort of nobodies in that, and that was our experience. In saying all of that, for those who want to go into exploring that further, I would give a word of warning that it is very dark, and it is something that you don't want to stay there for too long. And I probably stayed there in that mental thought for too long, and it's not a great place to be. So the idea of what we've then done, and I guess my journey of sharing that, because we tend to go through stages of waking up, if you like. And some of those stages are anger and fear and all of those things, through to the point of when we start to get to love and we get to all of that. And one of those things is creating the new. So I'm a big believer that we have to create a different world. And that's really what we've been doing at Living Free. That's what we've been doing with setting up the retreats, doing all of those sorts of things. And we've had picnics all around Australia as well, and meetups. And that sort of positive energy, I feel like we're able to do a lot more than focusing on trying to wake everybody up, trying to push fear. I feel like that's what they want us to push. And when we start pushing the other stuff and allowing people to learn who they are and get to, I guess, come through the blessings and work out what they're really meant to be doing in this world, not just working for the man and doing all of those things, but what's their creative ability to bring to the world. That's actually where we win. We don't win by focusing on that fear, which is what I think they want us to do.
Yeah, very good points. I think for me, the discussion that we've just had is important for people to realize the severity of the problems that we face in the world. And that can sometimes crack that facade and bring you towards that awareness of what are we doing? Are we slaves? Are we doing stuff for our families? Are we doing things with purpose? Which is a lovely segue into kind of what you're doing now. So I guess there's about 60, 70 odd people here in the room now. And we've got this banner that we call Common Law, but underneath that, we actually cover a lot of different things. So from your perspective, and I know I've been following Tom for a few years as well, has got very an interesting philosophy around the more esoteric side of contract law. What's your kind of stand in relation to? Do you lean more towards Black's Law Dictionary? Do you go more towards contract law? Are you more aligned with Tom? Where do you see the importance of knowing about the legal admiralty side of things?
Yeah, Tom and I are probably more aligned. It's funny, we've got Darren Dixon, who's very much constitutional statute law. Nick's very much spiritual law, and Tom and I are sort of somewhere in between those two elements there. But we all sort of cross over. So when we do our Lawful Me calls, we actually bring different perspectives to it. So for me personally, I feel like it's a journey, and sometimes you need to start at one end of that journey. So, whether you're doing, something simple like dealing with a fine or, something along those lines where there's not too much risk, that's one area, and that can build your confidence as to knowing who you are and doing all of that. But then as you go through, I've done probably 54 promissory notes, for example, helping people get out of debt. that's another level of understanding of in lawful processes. I also work with it. I'm on the board of a group called Empower Movement, and Empower Movement use a notice of liability process to go after the 5G vaccine, smart, what do you call it, the smart technology sort of stuff. And they've got their notice of liability process. Now they use, in their notice of liability, they've got the statute law, and they go through all the way to Lex Mercatoria, and then they go on to spiritual law. So basically they cover all of those things, constitutional all the way through. So I think there's a time for all of it, but personally, I think you can get wrapped up in some of those statute sort of laws, and I don't think that they apply to us. I think that our rights were given to us. If you look at the biblical stuff, that we were given dominion over the world. I think when you truly embody what that is, then all of that other stuff is applying to, the fake persona of what they're trying to link you in. So when you can separate those two worlds and know who you are, then that starts to sort of dissolve itself. But then when you start to embody that, it's almost as though there's certain things that can't touch you. And that's an interesting aspect as well. I'm not saying that we're invincible or anything, but I'm saying that things tend to not happen, in the way that would logically happen. Things like, I got fined in, I got arrested at one of the protests in Melbourne. We went to look up that fine, to deal with it, and it was gone. So that was one example. That, these sorts of things where they just seem to disappear. There seems to be something to that the more that you embody those things. If you talk to Cal Washington, who's on Empower, he'll talk about this stuff a lot. We do a webinar together as well. And, just being able to either walk past police, for example, when they had the mask mandates, and you're not wearing a mask. These sorts of things seem to happen quite regularly the more that you embody those things. So I think that there is a link to that spiritual side. There is a element of honor, integrity, accountability, responsibility, all of those things. When you start to embody those things, a lot of this other world doesn't attach itself in the same way, or can't have that same claim.
Yeah, it's almost like you're emitting certain types of charges that you either attract or repel. And my kind of thoughts are that if you're embodying from a place of a better energy and no fear, you don't seem to attract those more negative things that other people find themselves trapped in. Would that be an okay way of describing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, another example might be, as you go past a dog, for example, the dog will sense something that you can't see, and that person looks like the exact same person, but for one person the dog will snarl and go at them, and the next person the dog's all friendly. And so what is that they're picking up? There is some sort of energetic thing that's being put out by that individual. I think that extends to other situations, not just things like dogs. And there's many examples of people talking about that, whether it's because there's a level of protection when you're operating in that realm. I'm not sure, but that's really where I think our biggest learnings is focusing on that. And when we're talking about creating the new world, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a world that operates with integrity, with honesty, with all of these things, because that's the world that we want to see. And on a biblical sense, once again, they'll say we need to bring heaven to earth. What is that? Well, it's certainly not all of this deceptive behavior, the hate, the carry on that we see in this world at the moment. And those people tend to, in the old world, receive the benefits of that. And those who are potentially doing the worst of the things seem to be highlighted as, famous, etc., etc. So the more bad that you do, you seem to be elevated. But I do believe that there's another world that we're already creating that is rewarded by the more good that you do. And that just goes from day to day.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a case study, I guess you're following a little bit what's happening with Russell Brand at the moment, are you?
Not hugely, but
Well,
I got filled
I,
in today about what was happening. But yeah, I don't follow him much.
I don't follow him too much, but I mean, it's one of the biggest witch hunts I've seen in a while. But I actually remember when he hit the scene, he was, despicable. He was an absolute grub. So I kind of remember him from that time. That's coming out now, and it's interesting to me that he kind of got fame, fortune, multi-millions, all this kind of stuff. It looked like he was living the life, but it seems that I don't know whether there's celebrity contracts that you have to do the walk of shame, or whether that stuff has caught up with him, or I mean, we know he's heavily involved with the Rothschilds family. It does seem that as famous as he is, it's not quite working out for him. But I agree with you. I think if you when we're in this kind of setting where we're all trying to achieve, and where you are, Nate and Tom, you kind of have to hold yourself to a higher standard, because you're talking the talk. And I don't think any of us really wants to be too deceived. I mean, we all have our flaws, and I guess we have our negative traits. But even when I'm talking to these groups here, we know the conversation is actually starting from a much truer place than with, I'll use the word, the normies.
Yeah, I agree. But in saying that, there's no difference in that. I guess I really want to emphasize that there's literally like, I've done drugs, I've done, whatever you want to say in life. Very much, and this was the interesting thing on my journey, is that I had a couple of companies, things were going quite well. We had multiple sites around Australia. I was living in a fairly nice house, and I was just starting to wake up. In fact, I was taking my dog for a walk down to the football oval, and it was at night time, and I sat in the middle of the cricket pitch. And this was at a stage where I was starting to think, well, maybe because I was seeing the evil that was happening in the world as far as the trafficking and all of that, that was one of the first things that I was introduced to. I basically said, look, God, this is my background. I'm assuming if you're God, you already know this stuff, but I've got this adventure background. I'm willing to go to places that others aren't. Use me if you want to use me, and I'll fight and do whatever I can. And little did I know that my journey was going to then be, losing a couple of $1 million worth of contracts within the next month, of government contracts, etc., that I had, going through to the point where I couldn't afford to get baby food for my new daughter. So a very humbling sort of downturn into that, to then really working out what it was all about. And I kept volunteering. So Empower Movement, I was on the board of that, and I just kept volunteering. And I had this faith, I was building this faith, and for some reason, I was like, I shouldn't go out and get another job. I should just keep working on this. This is a really important project, and I'm going to keep doing these sorts of things and try to help with my business knowledge of what I'd developed over the last 15 years. To start to help bring to light some of these things. So I had to really have faith that I was on the right track, but I was still questioning my own faith in all of that. And so for me, it was a very difficult journey for the next couple of years. And so what people are going through now with sort of, or the post-COVID sort of stuff, and trying to work out what the world was, that was for me a few years before. So that was a very, I guess, a big blessing for me, really, because I don't think from a business point of view, we would have made it through COVID because of our structure of how we were set up anyway. So it just sort of happened to be a bit earlier, but that was what I was willing to do. And then obviously I was tested with going over to Arizona, and we'll put in some pretty dangerous situations. We had snipers up on hills. We had, armed people. It was pretty full on. You're taking on the cartels. And so that was pretty full on. And then, so I was tested from a financial point of view from all of these ways. And then obviously, what was I willing to do, with the trafficking? Well, I was willing to go as far as I was able to go there. And then, I then got tested with the cancer diagnosis. And it was really interesting, because you can become a victim with all of this. And this is probably the biggest takeaway with everything I'm saying, is that it's very easy for us to become victims, and that's what they want us to do. And so the moment that we are a victim, we start to change our resonance or what we're putting out. So for about 2 days after my diagnosis, I was feeling sorry for myself. I was looking at the kids and I was like, okay, well, how long have I got? Do I have to cherish this moment? Do I have to do this? All the crazy stuff that might come into your head. And then I had this really strong feeling come over me that what I was going through was not about me. It was about someone else or something else. And so that sort of gave this immediate sort of relief. And I said to my wife, look, it's going to be fine. I know that this is part of a bigger journey. And it was interesting. There was about 6 months gap. So it took me about 3 months of research of what sort of protocols I was going to do. And then about 6 months after the diagnosis, my stepdad was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And, I had all the supplements there and there was zero, and his was actually a little bit worse. Non-Hodgkin's tends to be a bit more aggressive, and it was through his nose and everything as well. And I was able to give him supplements that day. It was like he got his diagnosis and literally we had him on an alternative health protocol that day. And there's no way that he would have taken that alternative health protocol if it wasn't me taking those steps prior. He would have gone down the chemotherapy sort of stage, and I don't think he'd probably be with us. But then the other blessings that occurred was the HealMe. We started HealMe and we've helped people there, and then we started Lawful Me and Living Free, and all of these blessings where we've now got thousands of members online that we sort of help on this journey. So without what would seem to be a negative thing with the cancer, you don't have these blessings. And I think that the moment that we realize that everything that we go through can actually be a blessing, whether it be COVID, whether it be the loss of someone, whatever it is, we start to focus on the good things. We start to actually change the outcome. And from a health perspective, they try to, when you go into the hospital and everything, they try to put the fear into you. You're going to die, you're going to this, you must do this, you've only got days, you've got to go rush into chemo, and it's all just bullshit to scare you, so that is actually setting up the fear inside you, and that's the resonance that you're putting out, which is actually going to grow any cancer or anything like that inside you. So the very thing that you need to not do, which is very hard to do, but I was fortunate with lots of adventures of having to be calm in very difficult situations, like under the ice, and your regulators freeze up and you've got to calmly change over your air with no way to get to the surface. Like, I'd tested myself many times in these different environments to just stay calm. And that's, so you can't be a victim in any of this stuff. You have to be proactive and start finding solutions and be part of a solution. Being part of a community is huge as well. Just having everyone there in the community that you've got is so beneficial, and being around like-minded people and starting to focus on the positive stuff of what can we create. If we just look at the world as to where we're at the moment, I think we were selected to be here for this very time, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. It's a huge adventure. Sorry.
Yes, interesting things you're saying there for sure, Dave. And I don't know if you remember, but my background was in nursing. I'm an ex-intensive care nurse, and I'd probably clarify that the clinicians and the doctors are not deliberately setting out to cause fear, but the structure has been created that they have to deliver those narratives. So when you look behind who invented the system, which is the Rockefellers essentially, you can really see clearly. And the other thing which I teach about a lot is the nocebo effect, the manifestation of illness. So I think that's really important. I mean, it's great that you saw the world as you did, because you didn't fall foul of the nocebo effect. If I can get a timeline, when was that diagnosis of the Hodgkin's for you? What did you do, and where are you at now in relation to your health?
So it was this about October 2020, I think it was, that I felt lumps on my neck, and so then I was trying to work out how to effectively find out what that was. They thought pretty early, it was within that week, that I had an ultrasound, and they thought that it looked like it was some sort of lymphoma, but I didn't want to let them go in and start doing biopsies, because my research showed that biopsies can actually open up those pathways and cause other trouble. So I spoke to them about different options. I went and got a thing called a thermogram. That sort of indicated again that there was stuff going on. So that's a non-invasive sort of heat map of your body, but it can't give you that diagnosis. And so it was actually December 31st, so it was New Year's Eve of 2020, that I went in and I had 3 nodules taken out. So it's called a neck dissection. They took that out and then they were able to do the biopsies outside of my body. And that seemed to be a safer way. So it was about January 2021, in the first few days of that I was given the diagnosis, but I was pretty certain a few months before that, in the October. And I started from the October, I cut out sugar straight away as the first thing. When I say I cut out sugar, I thought I'd cut out sugar. And it was only further in my journey that I worked out that I was still actually having a lot more sugar than I probably should have for where I was. But, I took out the majority of terrible sugar that I was having, but I was still probably having a lot more carbs and everything that I should have for where I was.
And where are you at with your health now? Do you still have that diagnosis? Are you in remission, or what's the situation?
Yeah, interesting journey. When I started off, I thought I was going to get every few months I would go and get a scan and I'd see where I was. And I got the first scan and I'd shrunk it. Then I got the second scan a few months later, it had got bigger. And the mental torment of going through that wasn't working for me. And I'm like, that's it, I'm not getting scans, I'll do blood tests. In that time, all these other blessings have occurred. I've got a lot, lost weight, to a healthy weight that I maintain. My family all eat better. That's been a big blessing. And we've all sort of increased our health journey because of that. So, once again, all these blessings, but I don't really focus on the diagnosis. I tell the story from a, informative aspect, but I barely talk about it. And in fact, a guy that I play hockey with on the weekend, he found out for the first time, and I'd been playing with him for a few years. And so I just don't talk about it. I don't want to give it any more power than, what it needs. But, for this sort of stuff, I'll talk, tell the story, but I don't focus on it at all. I think it's an ongoing health journey.
Excellent. I think that's important, but I think it's really very relevant as well, though, isn't it, that you have that personal story, because I have to relate what I teach people to other stories. But for you to say, listen, I had this supposedly serious condition, and now I'm looking like I'm at the other side of it, that's very, very powerful to carry a lot of weight about the information that you tend to give to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to be able to share that. And I do feel like, once again, I did ask for it, I said to God, I'm willing to go to places that others aren't, or whatever. And my deal with him was basically, you look after me and my family, and I'll fight however I can and share and do whatever I feel like I'm led to do. And from that point of view, there's nothing that's occurred, from my health. I haven't actually had any negative symptoms, where, there was one time where I feel like the infection got out of control a little bit, and I was fatigued and all of those things. But, that was for a couple of weeks. Apart from that, in the 3 months, almost 3 years now, I haven't felt better. In fact, I mentioned I play hockey. Before I was kind of top 5 in the best and fairest, and over the years, the last few years, I've been the best, won the best and fairest each time. And that's when I'm meant to be unhealthy with cancer and all of these things. It's a funny thing, because you start to look after your health and everything else starts to get better. And I think that there's also a clarity of mind that occurs as you start to look after your body as well, which helps you on that journey. So we're trying to get rid of all of those toxins, and those toxins can also be people. It can also, be spiritual sort of stuff, all of that sort of thing. We want to stay away from all that toxicity as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And even that mental toxicity, as you referred to before, falling into that fear and looking at those more negative things. So with that in mind, let's change tactics just a little bit, and we will mention the event that's coming up in Mariba, because we got a lot of local people here and they also know other people. I interviewed Rebecca and Mel on my radio show just fairly recently, and the event is called Apocalypso, I believe, and it's on October 20th. And you've got a fairly prominent role in that weekend.
Yeah, both myself and Tom are going to go up. There's quite a few other good guests as well that I know of. I might actually share screen. I think there's more information on here that I could probably share. It's just bringing this up. So this is our platform. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, nice and clear.
Okay, so we've got all HealMe and all of that, but I'll show you through what we have. We have heaps of like online sort of chats and that sort of thing. So this is the Apocalypto, Far North Queensland. So it's Friday, October 20th to Sunday, October 22nd in Barron River. You guys will probably know where that is more than what I do. And it's with createmore.com.au. There's speakers Tom Barnett and myself, Dale Holmes, which he's quite well known. Michael Love, he's actually on our platform. He's a really nice guy. And I don't know some of these others, but is that Rebecca that's running the events as well here?
I do think, yeah, she's coming up. Apparently she's cooking a big Mexican meal for everybody who attends.
Okay. Yep. So, and they've got some workshops there and everything. So no, it should be really good. And I look forward to meeting everyone up there. And if there's any Living Free members up there, we're going to do a catch up after as well, with Tom and myself. But this is our platform here with all the different sort of HealMe. I'll show you a couple of things just so you get an idea of what we do. So natural cancer, and we've got sort of all different topics and that sort of thing, different treatments. And we just share information, lots of articles, lots of videos, and then we do lots of webinars similar to what we're chatting about now. And there's all the different platforms there. So that's what we do over there. And but definitely try to come up and get to that event in the 20th of October, so just under a month, or just over a month, sorry. And look forward to catching up with people there, and I'll share my story a little bit further and see if we can inspire anyone to do, get onto their true path.
Excellent. And just for everybody, I got an email from Rebecca as well, and for everybody in the Common Law group, there's a small discount on the price. So if you just want to talk to me, and if anybody's interested in tickets, I can arrange that for you. So Dave, for you, you are doing some workshops. What are your workshops going to focus on?
Well, are you talking about Apocalypto or just in general?
Oh yeah. Well, actually, wherever you want to go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Tom and I do any workshops up there, not that I know of. I think we'll do a FAQ and we'll have a chat and we'll do that sort of thing. But there's other people doing workshops there. But no, we do our own sort of different workshops. Tom sort of travels around. He was in Sydney last week doing some workshops down there. He's got some more coming up in Melbourne. We've got some guys over in Perth and that sort of thing that will do some different stuff. And then once we launch the retreat, we'll be doing a lot more in-person sort of events where people can come, and we've got glamping tents, and we've just been building out sort of showers and bathrooms and all of that sort of thing in a big space where we can host a whole bunch of people. And yeah, once we sort of get this health retreat going, we'll have all the different access to all the different IVs and stuff, where we can do a lot of the health sort of protocols where we look at the bloods and fix up all the mess that's occurred, both in things like cancer or things like vaccine injury or whatever else. So they're the main things that we're going to focus on. but there'll be a bunch of other retreats where we'll bring in some of that adventure background. I think it'll be probably April next year, we'll run an Optimize Me Kokoda. So we'll head across back to Papua New Guinea. So we'll bring in some of my adventure background and run that. And the Optimize Me is a program that's available on the Living Free movement. And that's sort of about getting to know yourself. It's about basically working out, dropping the fear, working out who you really are, getting rid of toxicity, all of those things. It's kind of a self-development course, but a lot of those things are things I've learned over many years and put into it. And that's available free on the platform for any full members. So, we share that, but we're also going to be doing this Kokoda version of it as well, where we sort of catch up and go through those things together. And that will help, I've run it before, but it helps with a lot of the mental resilience, mental illness, that sort of stuff. We can do a whole lot of work in that area. And from that sort of thing, there's so much that people have got with traumas and that sort of thing that's affecting them from becoming their best selves. And that's the sort of thing that we're doing with the Optimize Me program. So lots of elements. It just depends on what people are interested in or where they're at in their journey as to what they need. But we've got lots of different people that contribute to that.
Awesome. So what I'll do now, did you have much more to add? Because I'll throw I'll leave it open to the audience to get some questions going. And anything else you wanted to?
That tends to be a sign of detoxing and quite full on. I backed off on it. On all of these things, there's not one answer to detoxing. And it's, there's all these different levels, different things for you to do. So, it's worth trying. It's worth seeing if it works for you. But there's lots of other options in that process as well. And it depends really on where you're at. For me, what happened when I started to do some heavy detoxing, my results went worse in the blood tests. And in reflection now, looking back, it was because I still had the mercury in my jaw. And what that was actually doing was pushing it around my body further. So one of the key things with going through any detox is to remove the source of the issue. And for me, I didn't realize, even though I'd been checked out by a couple of dentists, that I still had the mercury in my body. So if we talk about where we're sort of at in the protocols, I've now finally removed the source, which took me way too long to do. And then what I'm focusing on now is gut repair. So that's really important. So before you look at heavy detoxes, you've got to make sure that your gut is working and all of the systems know how to get rid of the toxins. So gut health is a major aspect. So that's my next stage. And then I'll go probably back onto some of those other protocols and eliminate anything that's remaining in my body that needs to be eliminated. So there's a couple of steps before jumping into something like CDS that you need to check off. So make sure that you haven't still got the source, and that could be from mold. It could be, using plastics. It could be a whole range of different things. A lot of, especially for women, there's a lot of products that are used that can cause a lot of issues as well. So you want to remove all of those things as much as possible. Then you want to make sure that all your pathways are working to detox, and then you can go into the detox phase. And one of the final detox phases would also be crossing the blood-brain barrier, which is where you can. That's one of the hardest things to detox, is that heavy metal detox that's crossed the blood-brain barrier, but it is possible to do, but you need to make sure that all of those pathways are working first. Otherwise, you can be causing further issues.
Somebody's just asked if you could share some information about your health retreat, where it's going to be, and the kind of costs that might be involved in that, Dave.
Yeah, it's in the Byron hinterland. So it's about half an hour from Mullumbimby, if you know where Mullumbimby is. And it's on a beautiful property. It's got a creek running through it. and what's it on, about 40 something acres. It's got like a forest going through. It's beautiful. So we haven't set the pricing yet, and it's going to depend on most likely the level of assistance that you'll need in things like IVs, that sort of stuff, depending on where you're at and what you've got. So there'll be blood work done at the start, then you'll go on to your different protocols. And part of that will also be then educational, meditation, breath work, all of those things, like trying to sort of bring ourselves down into that sort of healing state. And then they'll be able to continue that once they go home as well, with being online and having that. I would say, it's going to depend on but what I do on the initial costings, just to give you an idea, I looked up to go to Mexico to do some of the health retreats over there for the cancer. And on a 21-day health retreat, there was one called the Oasis Clinic, but there's a couple over on that border. They were going to charge me it would cost me about $60,000 for their protocol. And for me, that was basically everything that I would be able to get my hands on. And that would give me one shot at fixing this. And I wasn't willing to do that. I think that in reality, we could probably do that somewhere between 10 and 15 and include more in the protocol with all the IVs, nurses and everything than what they were doing. So we'll be able to well and truly smash what's available out there. We're working with a compounding pharmacist. That's one of the big things, is big pharma still control things like vitamin C, for example. They try to make it very costly. So even to get IV vitamin C, you need it probably every day if you're doing a full cancer protocol. But they say sort of 3 times a week at least. That would cost you at any integrative doctor at least $1,200 at the moment, by the time they get the nurse. And the vitamin C itself, they would charge you a couple of $100 for. And when you look at that from a IV perspective, and what's inside it, vitamin C is very cheap. And so it's crazy on those sorts of things. So we're actually bypassing a lot of that, and then we'll be able to look after people at a much more competitive rate.